You're listening to Wisdom Life, where history hums like a lullaby, and memory drapes itself around your thoughts like a soft quilt on a still night. Tonight, we drift back to an age when faith was the heartbeat of every soul, and silence echoed through stone corridors like a sacred hymn. We journey to a medieval convent, nestled among ancient trees and beside a river that never rushes, only whispers. In that quiet sanctuary, where candlelight flickers and prayers rise like mist, we'll discover something tender, not scandal in its loudest form, but gentle truths. Fleeting glances. Quiet longings. Moments that remind us, even within hallowed walls, hearts pulse. They ache. They dream. Before we begin, if it feels right to you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It truly means the world to me and helps others find their way to this quiet corner. And if you'd like, share in the comments where you are and what time it is as you listen. You might just find someone else, somewhere far or near, lying under their own blanket, eyes closed, breathing in this same story with you. Now, if you're ready, let's begin together. Dim the lights. Let your body melt into the pillow. Close your eyes. Inhale slowly, and exhale, releasing whatever still clings to your day. And now, gently, softly, let's step into the year 1347. To a convent where secrets bloom like wild. Part 1, The Quiet Convent by the River. Let us step gently into the year 1347. The world is wide and slow, and time moves like a river winding through forest and field. The air smells of moss and stone, and the sky holds the soft gray of early morning. Somewhere not far off, birds call to one another from high branches, their voices drifting down like feathers on still air. We are walking now, not with our feet, but with our minds, toward a quiet place. A place where life unfolds in rhythm, where each day begins and ends with the toll of bells. This is the convent of St. Aurelia, nestled in the hills of southern France, where the land rolls gently beneath skies that rarely hurry. The road leading to it is narrow, lined with wildflowers and old stones worn smooth by centuries of rain. You can hear the distant murmur of a stream hidden somewhere beyond the trees, and if you listen closely, you might catch the faint sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, belonging to someone wrapped in robes of deep brown wool. This is a place built for silence. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that feels full, full of prayers whispered behind closed doors, full of thoughts that rise like incense before vanishing into shadowed ceilings. It is a place that asks nothing of the outside world, and yet, somehow, everything finds its way here eventually. The convent itself is made of stone that has grown darker with time. Ivy clings to its walls, and ivy grows even in places no one tends. Windows are small and thick, letting in only slivers of light that stretch across the floor like fingers reaching forward. There is no glass, only shutters carved with care, opening just enough to let in the scent of pine and the hush of wind passing through leaves. Inside, the halls echo softly when someone walks them. The sisters move quietly, their habits brushing against the stone floors as they pass from room to room. No one speaks unless it is necessary. They greet one another with nods, with small smiles that don't need words. Their lives are woven together with routine, rising before dawn, lighting candles, kneeling in prayer, then tending to gardens, animals, or books stored carefully in wooden shelves. There is a rhythm to everything here. Morning brings soft singing, midday brings work, evening brings reflection, and night brings rest. Each hour marked not by clocks, which do not yet tick in these halls, but by the movement of sun across sky, and the ringing of bells that seem to know exactly when to call the sisters back to themselves. Outside the convent walls, the world changes, kingdoms rise and fall, wars begin and end, plagues come and go. But within this quiet space, time seems to hold its breath. Here, the days feel long and steady, and worries seem to soften at the edges, as though the very air knows how to soothe what ails the heart. The garden is one of the first things you notice upon arriving. It stretches out behind the main building, enclosed by low stone walls covered in creeping vines. Herbs grow in neat rows: lavender, sage, thyme, rosemary, each planted with care, each used for healing and comfort. In the center stands a small fountain, always running, always whispering. Its water comes from a spring nearby, and it never runs dry. At certain times of day, especially just after sunrise, you can find one of the younger sisters sitting near the fountain, her hands folded in her lap, eyes closed, listening. She does not pray aloud, nor does she read from any book. She simply sits, letting the world wash over her, letting the cool morning air fill her lungs. Her name is Sister Agnes, and she is not yet 20 years old. She came to the convent not by choice, but by necessity. Her family was poor, her father lost to war, her mother to illness. When there was no one left to care for her, the church offered shelter, and so she became a nun, not because she heard God's voice, but because she had nowhere else to go. Still, she does not resent this life. She finds beauty in the quiet, peace in the rhythm. She enjoys the scent of fresh bread baking in the kitchen, the warmth of candlelight during cold nights, the soft hum of voices raised in song. And though she has never known love in the way others speak of it, she knows tenderness, and the touch of an elder sister's hand on her shoulder, and the way the sunlight catches on the stained glass window above the altar, and the stories told in hushed tones before sleep takes hold. The other sisters vary in age, in background, and temperament. Some were born into noble families and chose this life out of devotion. Others, like Agnes, arrived with little more than hope and faith. Each has her own story, her own reason for being here, but all have chosen, or accepted, a life of service, of simplicity, of quiet. Mornings begin with prayer in the chapel. The sisters gather before the altar, heads bowed, voices soft but sure. Light filters in through tall windows, casting patterns of color onto the stone floor. Incense rises slowly, curling upward like breath escaping a sleeping body. After prayers, they scatter to their duties. Some go to the kitchen, preparing simple meals of bread, cheese, and soup. Others tend to the animals, a few goats, some chickens, and a pair of gentle horses kept for travel when needed. Still others spend their mornings in the scriptorium, copying holy texts by hand, dipping quills into ink and tracing letters onto parchment with careful strokes. Agnes spends much of her time in the garden. She loves the feel of soil between her fingers, the scent of crushed leaves underfoot, the way the plants respond to care. She talks to them sometimes, not expecting answers, but feeling better for having spoken. The older sisters smile when they hear her, not unkindly, but with knowing eyes, as though they remember a time when they too believed the world listened back. In the afternoons, there is time for reading, for writing, for quiet conversation. Some sit beneath the shade of trees, stitching embroidery or repairing torn robes. Others walk the perimeter of the grounds, pausing now and then to admire the view, rolling hills, distant forests, the soft curve of the river flowing gently past. Evenings bring more prayers, followed by supper eaten in silence. Afterward, the sisters retire to their cells, small rooms with narrow beds, wooden crosses on the walls, and tiny windows that open just enough to let in the stars. Before sleep takes them, they light a single candle beside their beds. It burns low through the night, a symbol of hope, of guidance, of presence. And as the wind whispers through the trees outside, and the moon casts silver light across the stone courtyard, the convent settles into stillness. And so, dear listener, we have reached the end of our first part together. We have stepped into the world of St. Aurelia's convent, felt the cool morning air, heard the soft ringing of bells, and met Sister Agnes, a young woman whose story is only beginning. If your mind is already heavy with sleep, if your eyelids are growing warm and soft, then please, allow yourself to drift. This story will wait for you. It will be here when you return. The light of morning arrives slowly at St. Aurelia's convent, as though it does not wish to disturb the quiet that has settled overnight. The first rays stretch gently across the stone courtyard, touching the edges of ivy-covered walls and warming the cool tiles beneath bare feet. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls out its greeting to the new day, and another answers from a nearby branch. In her small cell, Sister Agnes stirs beneath the heavy woolen blanket, not yet opening her eyes but sensing the shift in time. She listens for a moment, to the sound of wind moving through the open window, to the faint rustle of fabric as another sister rises in the next room, to the soft rhythm of her own breath filling and emptying like the tide rolling in and out against the distant shore. She sits up slowly, letting her feet find the floor, letting her body remember how to move after hours of stillness. A small basin rests on the wooden table beside her bed, filled with water from the previous evening. She dips her hands into it, feeling the coolness wake her skin, grounding her in this place, in this life. There is no rush here. No need to hurry toward anything unseen. Time unfolds gently, like pages turning one by one in an old book whose ending you already know, but which you still enjoy reading again and again. Outside, the bells begin to ring, their deep tones vibrating softly through the air. One by one, the sisters rise, light candles beside their beds, and prepare themselves for the day. Some splash water onto their faces, others sit quietly for a moment, breathing deeply before stepping into the halls where the scent of burning tallow mixes with the earthy aroma of stone warmed by early sun. The chapel fills slowly, the sisters entering one by one, heads bowed, hands folded. They take their places along the wooden pews, kneeling briefly before sitting. The silence is not empty, but full, filled with prayers not spoken aloud, with thoughts that drift like smoke through the rafters above. A single candle burns at the altar, casting flickering light over the carved figures of saints and angels watching silently from their places on the stone walls. The sisters begin to sing, their voices low and steady, rising together like mist lifting from the river outside. Agnes closes her eyes and lets the sound surround her. She does not always understand the words, but she feels them, feels the way they settle into her chest, the way they carry her forward even when her mind wanders elsewhere. After prayers, they file out into the hallway, where the scent of fresh bread begins to drift from the kitchen. It is the same every morning, simple food, prepared with care, shared without waste. Nothing here is extravagant, but everything is enough. As Agnes steps into the garden, the world feels newly born. Dew clings to the leaves, catching tiny glimmers of sunlight like scattered stars fallen to earth. The fountain still whispers in the center, its water never ceasing, never rushing. She walks slowly among the rows of herbs, pausing now and then to touch the leaves of lavender or rosemary, feeling their texture between her fingers. This is her favorite part of the day, not because it is exciting, but because it is calm. Because here, in the garden, the world feels smaller, softer, more manageable. Here, she can forget about the weight of expectation, the rules that shape her days, the silence that sometimes stretches too long. She kneels beside a row of thyme and begins to pull away the weeds growing between the stems. Her hands move with practiced ease, careful not to disturb the delicate plants. She hums softly under her breath, not a hymn, not anything learned, just a tune that comes to her naturally, like birdsong carried on the breeze. Behind her, footsteps approach, slow, unhurried. She doesn't turn around, but she knows who it is. Sister Beatrice, the eldest among them, moves with a grace that seems almost otherworldly, as though she belongs to both this world and the next. "Morning, child," Sister Beatrice says gently, settling beside Agnes with the ease of someone who has done this many times before. "Good morning, sister," Agnes replies, smiling slightly without looking up. They work together in silence for a while, each tending to the plants with quiet reverence. There is no need for conversation, not yet. Sometimes, companionship is best expressed through shared stillness. Eventually, Sister Beatrice speaks again, her voice low and warm. "You seem thoughtful today." Agnes pauses, considering her words carefully. "I was just thinking about how much grows here without anyone seeing it. How much happens quietly." Sister Beatrice nods slowly. "That is often where the most important things happen. In quiet places. In silent hearts." Agnes looks up then, meeting the older woman's gaze. There is something comforting in those eyes, something that tells her she is seen, truly seen, even if no one else notices the thoughts turning inside her. She returns to her weeding, her fingers brushing against the damp soil, feeling the coolness seep into her skin. The morning continues in this way, gentle, slow, uneventful, yet somehow full. Later, she will return to the scriptorium, where parchment and ink wait patiently for careful hands. She will copy lines of scripture, dipping her quill into the dark liquid, tracing letters with precision. She will listen to the soft scratching of other quills around her, the occasional sigh of a sister stretching tired fingers, the hush of pages turning. But for now, she remains in the garden, surrounded by green and light and the steady rhythm of her own breath. And somewhere beyond the convent walls, the world continues to move, unaware of the quiet unfolding within. If your mind is beginning to feel heavy, if your thoughts are slowing down, if your eyelids feel warm and soft, then please, allow yourself to rest. This story will continue when you are ready. But if you're still listening, still breathing, still present in this moment, then thank you. Thank you for walking with me through the morning at St. Aurelia's Convent, for stepping into this quiet world where time moves gently and hearts beat softly beneath robes of brown and white. Part 2, Agnes, the girl from the town. Let us return now to Sister Agnes, still kneeling in the garden, still brushing her fingers through the cool soil, still breathing in the scent of lavender carried gently on the breeze. There is a quiet peace here, one she has come to know well over the years, but even within this peace, there are spaces where questions linger, soft and unspoken, like shadows stretching across the floor at dusk. She was not always called Sister Agnes. Once, long ago, before the convent stone walls became her home, she had another name, or perhaps the same name spoken differently, with a warmth that only family can give. She cannot remember exactly how it sounded when spoken by those who loved her best, only that it felt different then, more like a part of her, rather than a title worn like a garment not quite hers. She came to St. Aurelia's Convent at the age of 11, brought here not by choice, but by necessity. Her father had died in battle, lost to a war whose cause no one ever explained to her. Her mother followed soon after, taken by fever and coughing fits that left the sheets stained and the air heavy with sorrow. And when there was no one left to care for her, the church offered shelter, not out of love, perhaps, but out of duty. She does not resent this life. Resentment is a fire that burns too hot for quiet places like this. But sometimes, when the wind carries the scent of distant rain or when she hears the sound of travelers passing along the road beyond the convent gates, something stirs inside her, not sadness, not longing, just awareness. Awareness that there is a world beyond these walls, a world full of people who walk without robes, who speak without whispering, who live without silence pressing gently against their chests. The other sisters do not speak much of their lives before the convent. It is not forbidden, but it is understood that the past belongs to another time, and this life is meant for forgetting. Still, Agnes sometimes listens closely during meals or walks, catching fragments of stories told in hushed voices, of noble families and arranged marriages, of lost loves and broken promises, of cities filled with noise and light. She has never seen such places herself. She knows them only through words, through descriptions given in careful tones, as though speaking too loudly might awaken something sleeping in the minds of younger sisters who have never known anything beyond these halls. But she imagines them often, especially at night, when the candle beside her bed burns low and the wind moves softly through the trees outside. She pictures streets paved with stone, shops lit by lanterns, people walking arm in arm beneath warm skies. She sees faces she does not recognize, hears laughter that does not belong to prayer, feels the weight of a name spoken not as a title, but as an endearment. Sometimes, she wonders if she would have been happy in that world. If she would have grown into someone different, someone who wore colors instead of browns and whites, who danced instead of prayed, who touched hands with someone not because they were both serving God, but because they simply wanted to. But these thoughts do not last long. They rise like mist in the early morning, then fade as the sun rises higher, reminding her of the life she has chosen, or accepted, and the peace it brings. Still, there are moments when the past finds its way back to her, not through memory, but through small things, the smell of bread baking in the kitchen, the texture of parchment beneath her fingers, the sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway late at night. These things remind her that she is not entirely separate from the world she once knew. That somewhere inside her, the girl who arrived here all those years ago still exists, watching quietly from behind the veil of time. Sister Beatrice often says that every person carries two selves, the one they show to the world, and the one they keep hidden, close to their heart. Neither is better than the other, she tells Agnes one afternoon as they sit together in the garden. They simply serve different purposes. Agnes nods, though she doesn't fully understand. Not yet. But she holds onto the words, letting them settle deep within her, waiting for the day they will make sense. One evening, as she helps prepare supper in the kitchen, she finds herself humming again, not a hymn, not anything sacred, just a tune that comes to her naturally, like birdsong drifting through the open window. Another sister looks up, smiling slightly, but says nothing. No one scolds her. No one tells her to stop. And somehow, that means more than anything else. It is a small thing, just a hum, just a moment, but it feels like permission. Like a quiet voice saying, you don't have to forget everything. You can carry pieces of yourself with you, even here. Later that night, as she lies in a narrow bed, listening to the sound of wind moving gently through the trees outside, she lets herself think about what it might mean to be both the nun and the girl. To live in silence, but still feel joy. To wear robes, but still dream. To belong to God, but still wonder what it might feel like to belong to someone else, even just for a little while. And as sleep begins to pull her under, she allows herself to imagine, just for a moment, a world where she could have both. If your mind is beginning to feel warm and heavy, if your breath is slowing, if your thoughts are softening like ink bleeding into parchment, then please, allow yourself to drift. The morning light finds Agnes again, just as it always does, soft and quiet, stretching gently across the stone floor of her small cell. She opens her eyes slowly, letting the world return to her in pieces, the sound of birds calling outside her window, the scent of burning tallow drifting through the hallway, the distant murmur of voices rising like smoke from somewhere deep within the convent. She sits up, wrapping her robe more closely around her shoulders, feeling the cool air settle against her skin. There is a stillness here that she has come to know well, a kind of peace that does not rush or demand, but simply exists, like the fountain in the garden, always flowing, always present, never needing to explain itself. As she steps into the hallway, the bells begin to ring, slow and steady, calling the sisters together for morning prayers. She walks with them, one among many, her footsteps blending with theirs on the stone floor. They move like a single breath, in rhythm, in silence, each carrying her own thoughts beneath the heavy hush of early morning. In the chapel, the candles flicker gently, casting shifting patterns of light across the walls. The sisters kneel, heads bowed, hands folded. The air is thick with incense, curling upward like whispered prayers seeking the sky. Agnes closes her eyes and lets the moment surround her, feeling the weight of the silence settle into her chest. When the prayers end, they rise and disperse quietly, returning to their duties. Some head toward the kitchen, others to the scriptorium, and some to the gardens where the herbs wait patiently beneath the morning sun. Agnes chooses the garden today, stepping out into the open space where the world feels smaller and softer than beyond the convent walls. The lavender is blooming now, its scent filling the air with something warm and familiar. She moves between the rows, pausing now and then to brush her fingers over the leaves, feeling their texture, their life. It is strange, she thinks, how much grows unseen, how much happens without anyone watching. And yet, everything continues, whether noticed or not. A soft rustle behind her tells her she is not alone. Sister Beatrice appears beside her, moving with the same quiet grace as always. "You seem thoughtful this morning," she says gently, kneeling beside Agnes without waiting for an answer. "I was just thinking about how much I don't remember," Agnes replies, her voice barely above a whisper. "About my mother's face. My father's voice. About what it felt like to be someone else." Sister Beatrice nods slowly, as though she has heard these words before, spoken by many others who came before Agnes. "Memory is like water," she says after a while. "It moves, it changes shape, it slips through your fingers. But that doesn't mean it disappears. It only takes another form." Agnes considers this, letting the words settle inside her like seeds dropped into soil. She has often thought of forgetting as a kind of loss, but perhaps it is not. Perhaps forgetting is simply the way the mind makes room for new things, for peace, for purpose, for the quiet rhythms of life within these walls. They work together in silence for a while, pulling weeds, trimming branches, listening to the wind as it moves through the trees beyond the garden. There is comfort in this, and shared stillness, and gentle companionship that asks nothing more than presence. Later, in the scriptorium, Agnes sits at her usual place, dipping her quill into ink and tracing careful lines onto parchment. The words are familiar, scripture, prayers, verses copied again and again until they become part of the hand that writes them. But today, Her mind wanders slightly, her thoughts lingering on memories that feel more like dreams than real things. She remembers, or perhaps imagines, a house with wooden floors and windows that opened wide to let in a breeze. She remembers the scent of bread baking in the oven, the sound of laughter echoing down narrow hallways, the warmth of a hand holding hers when she was afraid. These fragments come to her slowly, like leaves floating down from a high branch, landing softly at her feet. She does not try to hold onto them too tightly. She knows that memories are like birds. If you reach for them too quickly, they fly away. But if you sit quietly, if you breathe slowly, sometimes they land close enough to touch. Outside, the wind carries the scent of distant rain, and somewhere beyond the convent walls, the world moves forward, unaware of the quiet unfolding within. But here, in this place, time moves differently. Here, the past and present exist side by side, neither pressing too hard against the other. Part 3. The First Spring of Agnes. Spring comes quietly to St. Aurelia's convent, like a secret whispered through the trees. One day, the air is still cold and sharp with the memory of winter, and the next, it carries something softer, the scent of damp earth, the warmth of sun lingering just a little longer on stone walls, the gentle hum of bees returning to the garden after months of silence. The world outside the convent begins to bloom again, though here within its walls, time moves as slowly as ever. Still, there is a shift, subtle but unmistakable, in the way the wind moves through the corridors, in the way light spills across the floor in wider beams, in the way the sisters walk with slightly lighter steps, as though even their habits feel less heavy beneath the touch of spring. For Agnes, this season feels different than the ones before. Not because anything has changed outwardly, the routine remains the same, the bells still ring at the same hours, the prayers still rise in the same quiet voices, but something inside her stirs, gently, like a seed waking beneath the soil. She finds herself noticing things more deeply now. The way the sunlight catches on the stained glass window above the altar, casting colors that seem brighter than before. The way the scent of lavender grows stronger in the mornings, wrapping around her like an old friend. The way the birds sing differently, not louder, but more tender, as if they are telling stories meant only for those who know how to listen. One afternoon, as she walks alone along the edge of the garden, she pauses beside a row of budding roses. Their petals are still tightly closed, but she can see the promise of color waiting within, soft pink, deep crimson, pale gold. She reaches out, brushing her fingers lightly against one of the buds, feeling its smoothness, its warmth. It is a small thing, just a touch, just a moment, but it makes her heart beat a little faster, as though something long forgotten has begun to wake inside her. She sits down on the worn wooden bench nearby, letting the sun warm her face. Around her, the world feels alive in a way it hasn't for months. Leaves unfurl on the branches overhead, tiny green shoots push through the soil, and the fountain in the center of the garden seems to whisper more clearly than before, as if it too knows that something new is beginning. Agnes closes her eyes and lets the warmth settle into her skin. She breathes deeply, allowing herself to be still, to be present. And as she does, memories begin to drift back, not clear or complete, but soft and fleeting, like clouds passing across the sky. She remembers, or perhaps imagines, standing somewhere like this before, long ago. A small courtyard behind a house she once called home. A patch of grass where she used to sit with her mother, watching the sky change from blue to gold to deep purple. The sound of laughter, the scent of flowers, the feeling of being held in a way that made everything feel safe. She doesn't try to hold onto the memory too tightly. She knows that doing so might chase it away. Instead, she lets it pass through her like a breeze, leaving behind only the faintest trace of comfort. Later that evening, as she returns to her cell, she notices that the windows feel warmer than before. The air inside is no longer thick with the chill of winter, but carries instead a kind of softness, the kind that makes it easier to breathe, easier to let go. She lights her candle and watches as the flame flickers gently, casting shadows that dance across the walls. For a moment, she thinks about how much has changed, and how much has stayed the same. She is still Sister Agnes. She still wears the robes, still prays in the chapel, still tends to the garden each morning. But something inside her has shifted, ever so slightly. And perhaps that is enough. In the days that follow, the changes continue, small, quiet, but undeniable. She finds herself smiling more often, humming softly under her breath as she works, pausing now and then to simply look at the sky without needing to move on. The other sisters notice, though they say nothing. They understand, in their own quiet ways, that spring brings more than just new life to the garden, it also brings awakenings to the heart. One morning, as she kneels in the chapel for prayer, she feels a warmth spread through her chest, not from the candles, not from the rising sun, but from somewhere deeper. It is not excitement, not joy exactly, but something close to peace. A peace that feels full, not empty. A peace that carries with it the sense that she is exactly where she needs to be, even as something within her continues to grow. And so, dear listener, we leave Agnes here, in the quiet unfolding of spring, in the gentle stirring of something new within her, in the slow, steady rhythm of a life lived in stillness. If your mind is beginning to feel warm and heavy, if your thoughts are slowing down, if your eyelids are growing soft, then please, allow yourself to rest. This story will wait for you. It will continue when you return. But if you're still listening, still breathing, still present in this moment, then thank you. Thank you for walking with Agnes through the first days of spring, for stepping into the quiet corners of her awakening, for allowing yourself to feel the gentle pull of renewal, of growth, of something beginning, slowly, softly, beautifully. We'll meet her again soon. For now, let your breath slow. Let your body sink deeper into your pillow. And if you can, imagine yourself still in the garden, the scent of blooming roses in the air, the fountain whispering nearby, and the stars watching silently above. The days grow longer now, and the light seems to linger in a way that makes everything feel softer. Even the stone walls of St. Aurelia's convent seem less cold, as though they too are warmed by the slow return of life to the world outside. The garden flourishes under Agnes's careful hands, each plant reaching toward the sun with quiet determination. One morning, as she tends to the rows of lavender, she notices something new, not in the plants, not in the sky, but in herself. There is a stillness inside her that feels different than before, not heavy or empty, but full. It is the kind of stillness that holds space for something else, something unnamed, something waiting. She pauses, wiping her hands on the cloth at her waist, and looks out across the garden. The fountain still whispers gently in the center, its water catching the morning light like scattered stars. Beyond the convent walls, the trees sway softly in the breeze, their branches stretching upward as if reaching for something unseen. A bird lands nearby, cocking its head at her with curious eyes. She watches it for a moment, feeling no need to move. There is comfort in this, in the presence of small things, in the quiet companionship of creatures who do not speak but still understand the language of stillness. Later that afternoon, as she walks along the outer edge of the convent grounds, she finds herself pausing beneath one of the taller trees. Its leaves rustle above her, casting shifting patterns of light onto the ground below. She leans against the trunk, closing her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun settle into her skin. There is something about spring that makes the world feel more open, more forgiving. It is not loud or dramatic, but gentle, like a hand resting lightly on your shoulder, reminding you that you are not alone. And for the first time in a long while, Agnes feels that truth settle into her chest without needing proof. She thinks again about the past, not with sadness, not with longing, but with a kind of quiet wonder. What would her life have been like if she had never come here? Would she have grown into someone entirely different? Would she have worn colors instead of browns and whites? Would she have danced beneath lantern-lit skies instead of kneeling in silent halls? She does not know the answers. Perhaps she never will. But there is peace in not knowing and allowing the questions to exist without demanding resolution. That evening, as she sits beside her candle, watching the flame flicker gently, she lets her mind drift through those thoughts again. Not with urgency, not with regret, but with a kind of soft curiosity. She imagines herself walking through a market filled with voices and smells and colors. She imagines laughter shared with strangers, the weight of a name spoken with affection, the touch of hands held not in prayer, but in simple human connection. These thoughts do not frighten her. They do not pull her away from her life here. Instead, they remind her that she is still capable of dreaming, even within these quiet walls, even within this life of service and stillness. And perhaps that is enough. In the days that follow, she finds herself lingering in places she once passed through quickly. She stops to watch the way the wind moves through the grass. She listens more closely to the birdsong that fills the early mornings. She smiles more often, not because anything has changed outwardly, but because something inside her continues to shift, slowly, gently, like the turning of seasons. One afternoon, as she walks alone near the edge of the forest beyond the convent, she hears a sound that is unfamiliar, the distant echo of footsteps, steady and unhurried. She pauses, listening. Whoever it is, they are not in a rush. They move with the same quiet grace as the wind, as the trees, as the world itself. She does not go to meet them. She simply stands where she is, letting the sound pass through her like a whisper carried on the breeze. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the sound fades, leaving only silence in its place. She does not think too much about it. There is no need. Sometimes, the world offers small moments like this, glimpses of something unknown, something passing through without demanding attention. And sometimes, all we can do is let them be, to carry them gently within us without trying to hold on too tightly. As the sun begins to dip lower in the sky, painting the horizon in soft hues of gold and violet, Agnes turns back toward the convent. Her steps are slow, her breath steady. The air around her carries the scent of blooming roses, of fresh earth, of something beginning, not loudly, not urgently, but surely. And so, dear listener, we leave Agnes here, in the quiet unfolding of spring, in the gentle stirring of something new within her, in the slow, steady rhythm of a life lived in stillness. If your mind is beginning to feel warm and heavy, if your eyelids are growing soft, if your thoughts are slowing down like the fading echo of a bell, then please, allow yourself to rest. This story will wait for you. It will continue when you are ready. But if you're still with me, still breathing, still present in this moment, then thank you. Thank you for walking with Agnes through the first days of spring, for stepping into the quiet corners of her awakening, for allowing yourself to feel the gentle pull of renewal, of growth, of something beginning, slowly, softly, beautifully. Part 4, Dreams in Candlelight. As the days continue to stretch longer and the nights grow softer with the warmth of spring, something shifts within Agnes, not suddenly, not dramatically, but gently, like the turning of a page in a book you are not yet ready to finish. She begins to notice her dreams more clearly now. Not the kind that vanish with the morning light, but ones that linger, soft and hazy, filled with colors she cannot name and feelings she does not yet know how to describe. They do not frighten her, nor do they excite her too much. They simply are quiet visitors that arrive without warning and leave behind only traces of themselves. Each night, after prayers and supper, after the sisters have returned to their cells and the candles have been lit beside their beds, Agnes lies beneath her heavy woolen blanket and listens to the world settling around her. The wind moves slowly through the trees beyond the convent walls, the fountain still whispers in the garden, and somewhere far off, an owl calls into the dark. She closes her eyes and lets her breath slow, feeling the weight of sleep begin to pull at her eyelids. And as it does, she slips quietly into another world, one that is not quite real, but not entirely imagined either. In these dreams, she walks through places she has never seen, wide fields bathed in golden light, narrow streets lined with lanterns that glow like fireflies, gardens where flowers bloom in colors that seem to shift when no one is watching. Sometimes, she is alone. Other times, there is someone walking beside her, not clearly defined, not someone she knows by name or face, but someone whose presence feels familiar, like the scent of lavender carried on the breeze. There are no words spoken in these dreams, no stories told in clear lines. Only feelings, warmth, curiosity, longing, peace. And always, there is music, faint and distant, like a song played on strings too delicate to hold for long. She wakes from them slowly, not startled, not confused, just different. As though something inside her has shifted during the night, as though the person who went to sleep is not exactly the same as the one who wakes again. At first, she does not speak of these dreams to anyone. She does not write them down or share them in quiet conversations over meals. She simply carries them with her, letting them settle into the spaces between her thoughts, waiting for them to reveal whatever truth they might hold. One evening, as she sits alone in the scriptorium copying lines of scripture onto parchment, she pauses mid-stroke, her quill hovering above the page. The candle beside her flickers gently, casting shifting shadows across the wooden desk. For a moment, she thinks she can see something in its flame, not a shape, not a message, just a feeling, warm and soft, like the memory of sunlight touching her skin. She blinks, and it is gone. Still, the sensation remains, a quiet knowing that something is unfolding within her, something slow and steady, like the blooming of a flower that does not rush toward fullness. Later that night, as she prepares for bed, she lights her candle and watches as the flame dances slightly in the cool air of her small cell. She sits on the edge of her bed for a moment, letting herself breathe deeply, letting her mind drift through the day's memories before sleep takes hold. And as she does, she allows herself to imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to live a life filled with color, with laughter, with simple human touch. Not in a way that pulls her away from this place, not in a way that makes her question her path, but in a way that reminds her she is still capable of dreaming. Because even here, in the quiet halls of St. Aurelia's convent, even beneath the robes of devotion, even within the silence that surrounds her every day, she is still a woman. Still a heart. Still a soul that beats softly beneath the surface. And perhaps that is enough. In the days that follow, the dreams continue, not every night, but often enough that she begins to expect them, to welcome them like old friends arriving at the door. Each time, they bring something new, a scent, a sound, a fleeting image that vanishes before she can fully grasp it. She does not try to chase them. She does not try to understand them completely. Instead, she lets them come and go as they please, allowing them to leave their gentle marks upon her heart. One afternoon, while tending to the rose of thyme in the garden, she finds herself humming again, not loudly, not in a way that draws attention, but softly, under her breath. It is not a hymn, not anything sacred. Just a tune that comes to her naturally, like birdsong drifting through the open window. Sister Beatrice looks up briefly, smiling slightly, but says nothing. No one scolds her. No one tells her to stop. And somehow, that means more than anything else. It is a small thing, just a hum, just a moment, but it feels like permission. Like a quiet voice saying, you don't have to forget everything. You can carry pieces of yourself with you, even here. The nights grow longer now, though not with cold. Instead, they stretch out like soft blankets, warm and slow, filled with the quiet hum of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Agnes finds herself waking more often during these hours, not because she is disturbed, but because something within her stirs, gently, like a flame that refuses to go out even when the wind moves through the room. She lies still beneath her woolen blanket, listening to the world around her. The candle beside her bed burns low, casting flickering shadows across the stone walls. Somewhere beyond the convent gates, an owl calls into the dark, its voice blending with the hush of night air slipping through the open window. In these moments, between sleep and wakefulness, her dreams feel closer than ever, not yet fully formed, but lingering at the edges of her mind like distant stars waiting for the sky to darken enough to be seen. One night, as she drifts between wakefulness and slumber, she finds herself standing somewhere unfamiliar, not in the garden, not in the chapel, not in any place she has known before. It is a field bathed in moonlight, wide and open, where the grass sways gently in the breeze and the air carries the scent of lavender and rain-soaked earth. There is no one else there, and yet she does not feel alone. There is a presence nearby, not threatening, not overwhelming, just there. Like the warmth of sunlight on skin, like the soft touch of a hand resting lightly on her shoulder. She does not turn to look. She does not need to. Instead, she simply breathes, letting the moment settle around her like a familiar song played in a language she cannot quite understand but still feels in her bones. And then, as quickly as it came, the dream begins to fade, not with force, not with urgency, but with the same gentleness that brought it to her in the first place. The field blurs at the edges, the scent of lavender grows fainter, and the presence beside her slips away like mist rising from the river at dawn. When she wakes again, the candle beside her bed is nearly burned down to its base, its flame flickering weakly before finally going out. The room is darker now, but not empty. The silence feels full, full of things she cannot name, full of feelings she does not yet know how to describe. She sits up slowly, wrapping her robe more closely around her shoulders, letting the cool air settle against her skin. Outside, the wind moves gently through the trees, carrying with it the hush of leaves and the distant echo of something unknown. She does not try to chase the dream. She knows better than to grasp too tightly at things that are meant to slip through her fingers. Instead, she lets it remain where it is, close enough to remember, far enough to leave space for what might come next. Later that morning, as she walks through the garden, she finds herself pausing more often than usual. She watches the way the light catches on the petals of blooming roses, listens to the way the fountain whispers in the center of the courtyard, feels the warmth of sun on her skin like a promise. It is strange, she thinks, how much can change without anything seeming different at all. Sister Beatrice notices her pause beneath the shade of a tall tree and smiles slightly, as though she sees something in Agnes that others may not. "You seem more present lately," she says gently, kneeling beside her to help tend to the rose of time. Agnes considers this for a moment before answering. "I think I'm just noticing things more deeply." Sister Beatrice nods slowly. "That's a gift," she says. "Even in quiet places, there is always something new to see if you only allow yourself to look." Agnes smiles slightly, brushing her fingers over the leaves of the plant beside her. Perhaps Sister Beatrice is right. Perhaps the world has always been this way, full of small wonders, waiting for someone to notice them. As the days continue to pass, the dreams return, not every night, but often enough that she begins to expect them, to welcome them like old friends arriving at the door. Each time, they bring something different, a scent, a sound, a fleeting image that vanishes before she can fully grasp it. Sometimes, she sees colors that do not exist in the waking world, shades of blue that shimmer like water under moonlight, hues of gold that glow softly like candle flames. Other times, she hears music that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, delicate strings, distant voices, the soft hum of something ancient and beautiful. But never does she see a face clearly. Never does she hear words spoken aloud. Only feelings, warmth, curiosity, longing, peace. And always, there is the sense that something is unfolding, slowly, steadily, like the turning of seasons. And so, dear listener, we leave Agnes here, in the quiet unfolding of her dreaming, in the gentle stirring of something new within her, in the slow, steady rhythm of a life lived in stillness. Part 5, Rainy Afternoon and an Open Door. The rain begins in the early afternoon, soft at first, just a whisper against the stone walls of St. Aurelia's Convent. Then it grows heavier, steady drops tapping gently on the roof tiles, filling the air with the scent of damp earth and cool stone. The wind moves slowly through the trees beyond the garden, carrying with it the hush of leaves and the quiet promise that the world is slowing down. Agnes sits by the window in her small cell, watching as the rain paints silver lines across the glass. She can hear the soft murmur of voices from the hallway, other sisters moving quietly from one room to another, their robes brushing softly against the floor. Somewhere nearby, the fountain continues its gentle whispering, even now, even beneath the falling rain. It is the kind of day that invites stillness, not out of duty or necessity, but naturally, like breath settling into a slow and steady rhythm. There is no rush here, no urgency. Just the quiet unfolding of time, stretching out like the sky above, wide and open and full of soft gray clouds. She reaches for the book resting beside her bed, a worn volume of poetry she has read many times before, though never quite the same way twice. Each page feels familiar, yet always offers something new, a line that speaks differently depending on the light, a word that carries more weight than she remembered. She reads for a while, letting the words settle into her mind like seeds dropped into rich soil. Then, when the silence around her feels too deep to ignore, she closes the book and lets herself simply be. Outside, the rain continues to fall, steady and unhurried. It does not demand attention, nor does it apologize for its presence. It simply exists, washing away dust, cooling the warm stones of the courtyard, reminding everything it touches that there is beauty in stillness. Later, after prayers and a simple meal of bread and soup, Agnes finds herself walking alone along the edge of the convent grounds. The rain has slowed now, leaving behind only the occasional drops slipping from the leaves above. The path beneath her feet is soft with moisture, and the air carries the scent of wet moss and blooming roses. She pauses near the outer wall, where ivy climbs slowly toward the sky. Her fingers brush lightly against the greenery, feeling its coolness, its life. She watches as water drips from the eaves of the building, forming tiny pools in the grass below. There is peace here, not loud, not dramatic, but deep. A peace that settles into her chest like warmth spreading slowly through tired limbs. And for a moment, she allows herself to imagine what it might feel like to stand somewhere like this, not within these walls, but elsewhere, in a place unknown, where the rules are different and the days unfold without bells to mark them. Not that she wishes to leave. Not exactly. But sometimes, the mind wanders, and there is no harm in letting it go. As she turns back toward the main building, she notices something unusual. The door to the infirmary is slightly ajar, letting out the faint scent of herbs and candle wax. Inside, she can hear the soft murmur of voices, Sister Beatrice speaking in hushed tones, and another voice, unfamiliar, calm. Curious, she steps inside, careful not to make too much noise. The room is dimly lit, filled with the quiet hum of burning tallow and the scent of lavender oil. A figure lies on one of the beds, not ill, not injured, but resting with eyes closed, wrapped in a heavy woolen blanket. Beside him stands a man she does not recognize, tall, with dark hair and a long coat still damp from the rain. He holds a small leather-bound notebook in his hands, turning the pages slowly, as if searching for something he has not yet found. Sister Beatrice looks up and smiles slightly upon seeing Agnes. "He arrived just before the rain," she says gently. "A traveler. A healer." Agnes nods slowly, stepping closer. The man glances up, meeting her gaze with quiet understanding. There is no need for introductions, not yet. Only the silent recognition of shared space, of quiet moments passing between strangers who may never meet again. For a while, she stays, listening to the soft sounds of the room, the crackling of the fire, the distant tapping of rain on the roof, the steady breathing of the sleeping man. It is a strange thing, this moment, ordinary, yet somehow significant, like the turning of a page in a story she has not yet begun to read. Eventually, Sister Beatrice gestures toward the doorway, and Agnes understands. She steps outside again, letting the cool evening air settle around her like a second skin. Behind her, the door remains slightly open. The rain has stopped now, but the air still carries its memory, cool and soft against Agnes's skin as she stands just outside the infirmary door. The sky above is a quiet gray, stretched wide like a blanket pulled gently over the world. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls out, not loudly, but with a kind of patience that suggests it knows the day will last long enough for everything to be said. Inside the small room behind her, the healer continues his quiet work. Sister Beatrice moves beside him with practiced ease, handing him small bundles of dried herbs, nodding at his instructions, listening with the kind of attention that speaks more clearly than words. Agnes watches them for a moment longer before turning away, letting the soft hush of the convent settle around her once more. She walks slowly along the stone path, her footsteps barely making a sound on the damp surface. There is something about days like this, rainy afternoons that stretch into quiet evenings, that make the world feel smaller, gentler, more forgiving. She finds herself drawn toward the garden again, though she does not know why. Perhaps it is simply habit, or perhaps it is because this place holds no urgency, no demands, only the steady rhythm of growing things and the quiet presence of the fountain at its center. As she steps between the rows of lavender and thyme, she notices how the scent of the plants seems stronger now, as if the rain has awakened something within them. The leaves glisten with tiny droplets, catching the soft light filtering through the clouds above. She kneels beside one of the rose bushes, brushing her fingers lightly across the petals. They are still damp, still holding onto the rain, and she lets her hand linger there for a moment, feeling the coolness against her skin. There is a stillness inside her now, not empty, not heavy, but full. It reminds her of the dreams she has been having lately, the ones that come without warning and leave behind only traces of themselves. Not all of them have been clear, not all of them have carried names or faces, but each one has left her with something, a feeling, a scent, a warmth that settles deep within her chest. She wonders if this is what it means to grow. Not outward, not in obvious ways, but inward, quietly, steadily, like roots reaching deeper into the earth without ever needing to be seen. Later that evening, as she sits alone in her cell, she lights her candle and watches the flame flicker gently in the cool air. Outside, the wind moves softly through the trees, carrying with it the distant echo of something unknown. She listens for a while, letting the silence wrap around her like a familiar song. And then, without meaning to, she begins to write. Not scripture, not prayers, not anything sacred. Just words, simple, quiet, unspoken until now. Words that do not try to explain, only to express. Words that do not seek understanding, only release. She writes about the rain, about the open door, about the man who arrived with damp clothes and quiet eyes. She writes about the way the world feels different sometimes, not louder, not brighter, but softer, more open, more willing to let things unfold without rushing them. She does not read back what she has written. She does not need to. She simply closes the notebook again, letting the words settle where they belong, not erased, not forgotten, just waiting. When sleep comes, it arrives slowly, like the fading of daylight into dusk. Her eyelids grow warm, her breath slows, and the candle beside her burns lower until finally, its flame dances one last time before vanishing into the quiet dark. Outside, the fountain still whispers. Somewhere beyond the convent walls, the stars begin to appear in the sky. And somewhere inside, a heart beats gently beneath robes of brown and white, carrying forward the quiet truth of a life unfolding, slowly, softly, beautifully. Part 6, Small Secrets. The days that follow the rainy afternoon feel different, not in any obvious way, not with loud changes or sudden shifts, but in small, quiet things that linger just beneath the surface of ordinary life at St. Aurelia's Convent. Agnes finds herself pausing more often now, listening to the world around her with a kind of soft curiosity. She notices the way the wind moves through the garden just before dusk, how the light catches on the stained glass window above the altar in the early morning, how the fountain continues its gentle whispering even when no one is near to hear it. She also begins to notice something else, the way the other sisters look at her sometimes, not with suspicion or concern, but with a kind of quiet knowing. It is not spoken aloud, not acknowledged directly, but it is there, a subtle shift in the way they greet her, the way they sit beside her during meals, the way they offer small kindnesses without needing to explain why. It makes her wonder if they can see something she has not yet named. One evening, as she walks alone along the edge of the convent grounds, Sister Beatrice joins her without saying much at first. They walk side by side for a while, their steps slow and steady, the cool air settling gently around them like a second skin. Eventually, Sister Beatrice speaks, her voice low and warm. "There are things we carry quietly," she says, not looking at Agnes directly. "Not because we are hiding them, but because they are not ready to be spoken." Agnes nods slowly, letting the words settle inside her. She does not answer right away, not because she has nothing to say, but because some things are still too soft to put into words. They continue walking, passing beneath the shade of tall trees whose leaves rustle softly in the breeze. Somewhere nearby, an owl calls out into the dark, its voice blending with the hush of night air slipping through the branches above. Later that night, as she lies in a narrow bed, she lets her mind drift through the day's memories. She thinks about the healer who arrived with damp clothes and quiet eyes, about the open door of the infirmary, about the notebook he held in his hands as though it carried something important. She does not know his name. She did not ask. But she remembers the way he looked at her, not with expectation, not with judgment, but with a kind of understanding that did not need words. It was a small thing, just a glance, just a moment, but it stayed with her. In the days that follow, she finds herself writing more often. Not scripture, not prayers, not anything sacred. Just words, simple, quiet, unspoken until now. Words that do not try to explain, only to express. Words that do not seek understanding, only release. Sometimes, she writes about the scent of lavender in the garden, about the sound of the fountain late at night, about the way the candle beside her bed flickers gently before sleep takes hold. Other times, she writes about things she cannot quite name, feelings that rise and fall like waves, thoughts that come to her in the space between wakefulness and dreaming, moments that feel like they belong to someone else, or perhaps to someone she has not yet become. She does not read back what she has written. She does not need to. She simply closes the notebook again, letting the words settle where they belong, not erased, not forgotten, just waiting. One afternoon, while tending to the rose of thyme in the garden, she finds herself humming again, not loudly, not in a way that draws attention, but softly, under her breath. The tune comes naturally, like birdsong drifting through the open window. Sister Beatrice looks up briefly, smiling slightly, but says nothing. No one scolds her. No one tells her to stop. And somehow, that means more than anything else. It is a small thing, just a hum, just a moment, but it feels like permission. Like a quiet voice saying, you don't have to forget everything. You can carry pieces of yourself with you, even here. Later that evening, as she sits beside her candle, watching the flame flicker gently in the cool air of her small cell, she lets her mind wander again. She imagines what it might feel like to live a life filled with color, with laughter, with simple human touch. Not in a way that pulls her away from this place, not in a way that makes her question her path, but in a way that reminds her she is still capable of dreaming. Because even here, in the quiet halls of St. Aurelia's convent, even beneath the robes of devotion, even within the silence that surrounds her every day, she is still a woman. Still a heart. Still a soul that beats softly beneath the surface. And perhaps that is enough. In the nights that follow, the dreams return, not every night, but often enough that she begins to expect them, to welcome them like old friends arriving at the door. Each time, they bring something new, a scent, a sound, a fleeting image that vanishes before she can fully grasp it. She does not try to chase them. She does not try to understand them completely. Instead, she lets them come and go as they please, allowing them to leave their gentle marks upon her heart. One morning, as she kneels in the chapel for prayer, she feels a warmth spread through her chest, not from the candles, not from the rising sun, but from somewhere deeper. It is not excitement, not joy exactly, but something close to peace. A peace that feels full, not empty. A peace that carries with it the sense that she is exactly where she needs to be, even as something within her continues to grow. The quiet that follows the rainy afternoon stretches into the days like a slow breath, settling into every corner of St. Aurelia's convent. The world beyond its walls may be rushing forward, chasing time and purpose with urgency, but here, life continues at its own gentle pace, unhurried, unbothered, deeply rooted in stillness. Agnes finds herself noticing more now, not just the small things, but the way they seem to carry weight in a way she hadn't noticed before. A glance between sisters during prayers. A soft sigh as someone folds her robes. The way the wind moves through the garden just before dusk, carrying with it the scent of lavender and damp earth. It is strange, she thinks, how much can be said without words. How much can be understood in silence. One evening, after supper and prayers, she walks alone along the edge of the convent grounds. The sky above is painted in soft hues of violet and gold, the last light of day slipping slowly behind the hills. She pauses beneath one of the taller trees, leaning against its trunk and letting the cool air settle around her like a familiar song. She closes her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. And as she does, something shifts inside her, not suddenly, not dramatically, but gently, like the turning of a page in a book she has not yet finished. There are things she carries quietly, not because she is hiding them, but because they are not ready to be spoken. Not all secrets are heavy. Some are simply waiting for the right time to unfold. Later that night, as she lies beneath her woolen blanket, she lets her mind drift through the day's memories. She thinks about Sister Beatrice's words, there are things we carry quietly. Not because we are hiding them, but because they are not ready to be spoken. She wonders if the other sisters feel this too, if they, too, have moments where something stirs inside them, something unnamed but real. If they, too, sometimes dream of places they have never seen, of lives they might have lived, of people whose faces remain blurred in the edges of sleep. She does not ask. She does not need to. Sometimes, understanding comes not through questions, but through shared silence, through the quiet knowing that passes between people who live closely enough to feel each other's rhythms. In the days that follow, she begins to write again, not often, not loudly, but steadily, like the fountain in the center of the garden, always whispering even when no one is near to hear it. Her notebook grows heavier with pages filled in soft ink, not scripture, not prayers, not anything sacred. Just thoughts. Just feelings. Just pieces of herself that she had once thought were meant to be forgotten. Sometimes, she writes about the way the morning light catches on the stained glass window. Other times, she writes about the sound of rain tapping gently on the roof tiles, or the scent of bread baking in the kitchen just before dawn. And sometimes, she writes about him, not by name, not with detail, but with a kind of quiet reverence. The healer who arrived with damp clothes and quiet eyes. The man who looked at her as though he saw something familiar, something worth remembering. She does not write with longing. Not exactly. But there is something in the memory of him, not sadness, not regret, but a kind of soft awareness. A recognition that even here, in the quiet halls of devotion, even beneath the robes of service, she is still capable of feeling. Still capable of dreaming. And perhaps that is enough. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, she finds herself pausing beside the fountain. Its water still whispers gently, catching the light like scattered stars. She kneels beside it, dipping her fingers into the cool surface, watching as ripples spread outward, touching the edges of stone and vanishing into stillness. For a moment, she allows herself to imagine what it would feel like to let go completely, not of faith, not of duty, not of the life she has chosen, but of the parts of herself that feel caught between two worlds. Not torn. just stretched. She does not try to chase the thought. She simply lets it pass through her like wind through the trees, leaving behind only the faintest trace of itself. Later that evening, as she sits beside her candle, watching the flame flicker gently in the cool air of her small cell, she lets her mind wander again. She imagines what it might feel like to live a life filled with color, with laughter, with simple human touch. Not in a way that pulls her away from this place, not in a way that makes her question her path, but in a way that reminds her she is still capable of dreaming. Because even here, in the quiet halls of St. Aurelia's Convent, even beneath the robes of devotion, even within the silence that surrounds her every day, she is still a woman. Still a heart. Still a soul that beats softly beneath the surface. And perhaps that is enough. Part 7. The Marks of Time. Years pass quietly at St. Aurelia's Convent, like leaves falling one by one from a tree whose roots have long since settled deep into the earth. The days continue in a gentle rhythm, prayers in the morning, work beneath the sun, quiet evenings filled with candlelight and soft footsteps on stone floors. Agnes remains. She does not leave, though she could. She is no longer a child sent here by necessity, no longer bound by the choices of others. And yet, she stays, not out of obligation, but because this place has become part of her, woven into the fabric of her being like threads in an old tapestry that still holds its shape. The garden still flourishes beneath her hands. The fountain still whispers in the center of the courtyard. The scent of lavender still rises gently into the air each morning as the sun warms the stones around her. But something within her has changed. It is not sudden, not dramatic, only subtle, like the way light shifts across the stained glass window above the altar, catching new colors with each passing season. There is a quiet fullness now, a sense of peace that does not come from forgetting, but from understanding. One evening, as she walks alone along the edge of the convent grounds, she finds herself pausing beneath the same tall tree where she once stood after the rainy afternoon. The bark is still rough beneath her fingers, the leaves still rustle softly in the breeze. But she feels different now, not younger, not older exactly, just more whole. Behind her, the sky stretches wide and open, painted in soft hues of violet and gold. A bird calls out somewhere in the distance, its voice blending with the hush of wind moving through the trees. She closes her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. And as she does, she lets herself remember, not with sadness, not with longing, but with a kind of quiet gratitude. She remembers the healer who arrived with damp clothes and quiet eyes. She remembers the notebook he held, the way he looked at her as though he understood something unspoken. She remembers the small kindnesses left behind in the space between their words. She does not know what became of him. He stayed only a short while before continuing his journey, disappearing beyond the hills as though he had never been there at all. But even now, years later, she can feel the echo of his presence, not loudly, not insistently, but gently, like the memory of a song you once heard and never forgot. She wonders if he ever thinks of her. Not in the way of longing or regret, but in the way of remembering someone who once shared a quiet moment with you, someone who carried something soft and real inside them, even if they never spoke it aloud. Later that night, as she sits beside her candle, watching the flame flicker gently in the cool air of her small cell, she lets her mind drift again. She imagines what it might feel like to live a life filled with color, with laughter, with simple human touch. Not in a way that pulls her away from this place, not in a way that makes her question her path, but in a way that reminds her she is still capable of dreaming. Because even here, in the quiet halls of St. Aurelia's Convent, even beneath the robes of devotion, even within the silence that surrounds her every day, she is still a woman. Still a heart. Still a soul that beats softly beneath the surface. And perhaps that is enough. In the days that follow, she begins to notice how time leaves its mark, not in loud ways, not in sudden changes, but in small, quiet things that settle slowly into the spaces between her thoughts. The fountain still whispers, but the stones around it have grown smoother with age. The roses still bloom, but their petals fall more easily now, carried away by the wind before they can fully open. The sisters still move quietly through the halls, but their steps are slower now, their voices softer, as though they, too, have learned to walk in rhythm with time rather than against it. Even Agnes feels it, the way her hands move with more certainty now, the way her breath settles more deeply into her chest, the way she no longer needs to chase answers that were never meant to be found. One afternoon, while tending to the rose of thyme in the garden, she pauses and looks up at the sky. It is wide and open, stretching endlessly above her, carrying with it the quiet promise that everything continues, not loudly, not urgently, but steadily, like the turning of seasons. She kneels beside one of the rose bushes, brushing her fingers lightly across the petals. They are still damp, still holding onto the rain, and she lets her hand linger there for a moment, feeling the coolness against her skin. There is peace here, not empty, not heavy, but full. It reminds her of the dreams she used to have, the ones that came without warning and left behind only traces of themselves. Not all of them have returned, but she no longer waits for them. She knows now that some dreams do not need to be relived to remain true. They simply are. Later that evening, as she walks through the garden once more, she notices Sister Beatrice sitting quietly near the fountain. The older woman smiles slightly as Agnes approaches, patting the space beside her in silent invitation. They sit together in silence for a while, letting the evening settle around them like a second skin. The fountain whispers gently between them, and the wind moves softly through the trees, carrying with it the scent of blooming roses and distant rain. Eventually, Sister Beatrice speaks, her voice low and warm. "You carry yourself differently now," she says gently. Not in a way that draws attention, but in a way that speaks clearly. Agnes nods slowly, considering her words. "I think I've finally stopped trying to understand everything." Sister Beatrice smiles slightly, nodding in agreement. That's often when we understand the most. They sit a little longer, listening to the world around them, the soft hum of crickets, the distant call of an owl, the steady rhythm of their own breathing. It is a simple thing, this moment, but it feels complete. Eventually, they rise and return to the main building, their steps slow and steady, their silence companionable. As Agnes reaches her cell and lights her candle for the night, she allows herself one last thought before sleep takes hold. She is still Sister Agnes. Still a nun. Still a woman who chose a life of service, of stillness, of devotion. But she is also something else now, something quieter, something deeper. She is a woman who has lived. Who has loved in small ways. Who has dreamed. And who, in the end, has found peace not by forgetting, but by remembering. The years continue to pass quietly at St. Aurelia's Convent, like pages turning in a book whose ending you already know but still enjoy reading again and again. The seasons change with gentle predictability. Spring brings new life, summer stretches long and warm beneath the sun, autumn whispers through the trees with golden leaves, and winter settles softly beneath blankets of snow. Agnes moves through them all with steady steps, her hands always finding something to tend to, her heart always carrying the quiet fullness that comes from living deeply without needing to rush toward anything unseen. One morning, as she walks through the garden before the first bell rings, she pauses beside the fountain. The water still whispers gently, catching the early light like scattered stars fallen to earth. She kneels beside it, dipping her fingers into the cool surface, watching as ripples spread outward, touching the edges of stone and vanishing into stillness. She lets herself remember, not with sadness, not with longing, but with a kind of quiet reverence. Not just the healer who arrived with damp clothes and quiet eyes, but all the small moments that have shaped her, the scent of lavender in the morning air, the sound of rain tapping gently on the roof tiles, the warmth of candlelight against her skin at night. These things do not leave loudly. They settle slowly, like dust resting on old wood, like the hush of wind moving through trees just before dawn. Later that day, while walking alone along the edge of the convent grounds, she finds herself pausing beneath the same tall tree where she once stood after the rainy afternoon. The bark is still rough beneath her fingers, the leaves still rustle softly in the breeze. But she feels different now, not younger, not older exactly, just more whole. Behind her, the sky stretches wide and open, painted in soft hues of violet and gold. A bird calls out somewhere in the distance, its voice blending with the hush of wind moving through the trees. She closes her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. And as she does, she lets herself remember, not with sadness, not with longing, but with a kind of quiet gratitude. She remembers the way the world felt when she was still learning how to belong here, the ache of loneliness softened by routine, the comfort found in the rhythm of prayers spoken in unison, the peace discovered in the simple act of kneeling beside a row of thyme and letting her fingers trace the edges of each leaf. She remembers the nights spent lying beneath her woolen blanket, listening to the soft hum of crickets beyond the walls, imagining lives she would never live but still allowing herself to dream of them anyway. And she remembers him, not by name, not with detail, but with a kind of quiet reverence. The healer who arrived with damp clothes and quiet eyes. The man who looked at her as though he saw something familiar, something worth remembering. She does not know what became of him. He stayed only a short while before continuing his journey, disappearing beyond the hills as though he had never been there at all. But even now, years later, she can feel the echo of his presence, not loudly, not insistently, but gently, like the memory of a song you once heard and never forgot. She wonders if he ever thinks of her. Not in the way of longing or regret, but in the way of remembering someone who once shared a quiet moment with you, someone who carried something soft and real inside them, even if they never spoke it aloud. Later that evening, as she sits beside her candle, watching the flame flicker gently in the cool air of her small cell, she lets her mind drift again. She imagines what it might feel like to live a life filled with color, with laughter, with simple human touch. Not in a way that pulls her away from this place, not in a way that makes her question her path, but in a way that reminds her she is still capable of dreaming. Because even here, in the quiet halls of St. Aurelia's convent, even beneath the robes of devotion, even within the silence that surrounds her every day, she is still a woman. Still a heart. Still a soul that beats softly beneath the surface. And perhaps that is enough. In the days that follow, she begins to notice how time leaves its mark, not in loud ways, not in sudden changes, but in small, quiet things that settle slowly into the spaces between her thoughts. The fountain still whispers, but the stones around it have grown smoother with age. The roses still bloom, but their petals fall more easily now, carried away by the wind before they can fully open. The sisters still move quietly through the halls, but their steps are slower now, their voices softer, as though they, too, have learned to walk in rhythm with time rather than against it. Even Agnes feels it, the way her hands move with more certainty now, the way her breath settles more deeply into her chest, the way she no longer needs to chase answers that were never meant to be found. One afternoon, while tending to the rows of thyme in the garden, she pauses and looks up at the sky. It is wide and open, stretching endlessly above her, carrying with it the quiet promise that everything continues, not loudly, not urgently, but steadily, like the turning of seasons. She kneels beside one of the rose bushes, brushing her fingers lightly across the petals. They are still damp, still holding onto the rain, and she lets her hand linger there for a moment, feeling the coolness against her skin. There is peace here, not empty, not heavy, but full. It reminds her of the dreams she used to have, the ones that came without warning and left behind only traces of themselves. Not all of them have returned, but she no longer waits for them. She knows now that some dreams do not need to be relived to remain true. They simply are. Later that evening, as she walks through the garden once more, she notices Sister Beatrice sitting quietly near the fountain. The older woman smiles slightly as Agnes approaches, patting the space beside her in silent invitation. They sit together in silence for a while, letting the evening settle around them like a second skin. The fountain whispers gently between them, and the wind moves softly through the trees, carrying with it the scent of blooming roses and distant rain. Eventually, Sister Beatrice speaks, her voice low and warm. "You carry yourself differently now," she says gently. Not in a way that draws attention, but in a way that speaks clearly. Agnes nods slowly, considering her words. "I think I've finally stopped trying to understand everything." Sister Beatrice smiles slightly, nodding in agreement. That's often when we understand the most. They sit a little longer, listening to the world around them, the soft hum of crickets, the distant call of an owl, the steady rhythm of their own breathing. It is a simple thing, this moment, but it feels complete. Eventually, they rise and return to the main building, their steps slow and steady, their silence companionable. As Agnes reaches her cell and lights her candle for the night, she allows herself one last thought before sleep takes hold. She is still Sister Agnes. Still a nun. Still a woman who chose a life of service, of stillness, of devotion. But she is also something else now, something quieter, something deeper. She is a woman who has lived. Who has loved in small ways. Who has dreamed. And who, in the end, has found peace not by forgetting, but by remembering. The night settles gently over St. Aurelia's convent, like a soft blanket pulled carefully over tired shoulders. The wind moves slowly through the trees beyond the garden, carrying with it the scent of lavender and distant rain. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls softly into the dark, its voice blending with the hush of leaves rustling in the breeze. Inside her small cell, Sister Agnes lies beneath her woolen blanket, listening to the quiet around her. The candle beside her bed burns low, casting flickering shadows across the stone walls before finally settling into stillness. Outside, the fountain continues its gentle whispering, as if telling stories only the night can hear. She breathes deeply, letting the cool air settle into her lungs, letting the weight of the day slip away like sand slipping through open fingers. Her thoughts move slowly now, no longer chasing answers or memories, but simply resting in the space between wakefulness and sleep. She is older now, though time has not marked her loudly. There are lines at the corners of her eyes, and her steps have grown slower, more deliberate. But there is peace in her movements, a quiet certainty that comes not from knowing everything, but from accepting what cannot be known. She closes her eyes and lets herself remember, not with sadness, not with longing, but with a kind of quiet reverence. Not just the healer who arrived with damp clothes and quiet eyes, but all the small moments that shaped her, the scent of bread baking in the kitchen just before dawn, the sound of rain tapping gently on the roof tiles, the warmth of candlelight against her skin at night. These things do not leave loudly. They settle slowly, like dust resting on old wood, like the hush of wind moving through trees just before dawn. And she knows now that love does not always come in loud ways. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a glance, in a shared silence, in the simple act of remembering someone long after they have gone. She does not regret the life she chose. She does not wonder what might have been. She simply allows herself to exist in this moment, in this place, in this quiet peace that has become her home. Outside, the stars watch silently above. And so, dear listener, we reach the end of our journey together. If your mind is already warm and heavy, if your eyelids are soft and slow, then please, allow yourself to drift. This story has reached its final page, but you may return to it any time, like an old book whose words still hold comfort even when read again. But if you're still with me, still breathing, still present in this moment, then thank you. Thank you for walking with Agnes through the quiet corners of her life, for stepping into the soft edges of a world where time moved gently and hearts beat softly beneath robes of brown and white. You were never rushed here. You were never asked to do anything but listen, to breathe, to be. And now, as we close this chapter, I invite you to let go of thought, of tension, of anything still clinging to your mind. Let your breath slow. Let your body sink deeper into your pillow. And if you can, imagine yourself still in the garden, the scent of blooming roses in the air, the fountain whispering nearby, and the stars watching silently above. Good night and sleep well.